No one knew of his past. He put his empty glass on the tray of an attentive, hovering waiter and declined another one. Keeping his wits about him was as ingrained in him as a tattoo on his skin. For a second, he thought of the crude tattoo he'd borne for years until he'd had it removed. It was one of the first things he'd done on his arrival in London almost 15 years ago, and his skin prickled now at the uncomfortable reminder. He shrugged it off and went to stake his claim on Miss Honora Winthrop. For a brief second, a sense of claustrophobia rose, but he clamped down on the sensation. He was where he wanted to be, where he'd fought to be. Composing himself, and irritated that he felt the need to do so, he found his eyes snagged and caught by a lone figure, a female figure. He could see immediately that she was not half as polished or alluring as the other women in the room. Her dress was ill-fitting, and her hair was a long, wild tangle of vibrant red. It suggested that there was something untamed about her, and it called to him on some deep level. Rocco's mind emptied of its original purpose. He couldn't look away from the enigmatic stranger. Before he had even registered his intent, he'd veered off course and was moving in her direction. Gracie O'Brien was trying to look nonchalant, as if she was used to being a guest at glittering functions in London's most prestigious venues, when in fact she was more used to being a waitress in far less salubrious surroundings. The kind of places where men habitually pinched her bottom and said crude things about her lack of ample assets. She gritted her jaw unconsciously, acknowledging that in today's economic climate a hard-won yet paltry art degree didn't count for much. She had a dream, but unfortunately, to finance her dream, she needed to work and to eat and survive, and the only jobs available to her right now were on the menial end of the scale. She mentally shook herself out of the uncharacteristic introspection. She could handle the menial end of the scale. She couldn't handle this. She was clutching her bag to her belly. Where had Stephen gone? She'd only come tonight as a favour to him. Her mouth compressed. Tension gnawed at her in this kind of surroundings, along with the habitual anxiety she felt for Stephen. Gracie forced herself to relax. This annual charity benefit thrown by the company her brother now worked for signified a huge turning point in his life, which had to explain his moody humour and nerves lately. That was all it was. She had to stop worrying about him. They were 24 now, and she couldn't go on feeling responsible for him just because she'd taken on that role from as far back as she could remember, when she'd been the one who had inevitably stood between him and some bully. She still bore scars of the scrapes she'd been in protecting her little brother, younger by 20 fraught minutes. Their mother, before she'd abandoned them, had never let Gracie forget that her beloved son had almost died, while Gracie had had the temerity to flourish with rude health. Her mother's parting words to Gracie had been, "I'd take him with me and leave you behind if I could. He's the one I wanted, but he's too attached to you, and I can't deal with a screaming brat." Gracie pushed down the surge of emotion she felt whenever she thought of that dark day, and sighed when she finally caught sight of her brother in the distance. Her heart swelled in her chest with love for him. Despite their abandonment and so much that had happened since then, they'd always looked out for one another. Stephen's inherent weakness had meant that even Gracie's strength hadn't saved him for a few dark years. But now he was back on track. Her brother had implored her earlier. "Please, Gracie, I really want you there with me. They're all going to have their wives with them. I need to fit in. Do you know what a coup it is to get